Hi, I'm Lisa Fletcher, and you're in the stream. Today, a viral music video that's brought Korean pop to the mainstream. But what's behind the growing phenomenon? And is the government benefiting or even driving the industry? Anousheh Hossain is back, filling in as digital producer for Malika, who's in Charlotte, North Carolina, covering the DNC. Anousheh will be going through all of your live feedback as it comes in. Anousheh, I'm looking at the tweets here, and I'm seeing a lot of K-pop and soft power in the same sentence.
It's really interesting. Our online community has a lot to say about K-pop, from its international popularity to its use as Korean government propaganda. So I'm going to be pulling up your tweets throughout the show. If you want to join us, our online community, please use the hashtag AJStream.
And joining us on set is Seok Hong. She is a writer at Open City magazine. She's also a peace activist and has worked on transnational labor campaigns involving Korean workers. Welcome to the stream.
Thank you.
And remember, you can participate in the conversation in a number of different ways. And if you want to do it with more than 140 characters, go to facebook.com/AJStream and like us.
Hi, I'm Sonia Falero. I'm the author of Beautiful Thing, Inside the Secret World of Bombay's Dance Bars, and I'm in the stream.
The South Korean entertainment wave has crashed onto the global scene as the song Gangnam Style by hip-hop artist Psy continues to rake in views on YouTube. In less than 2 months, more than 95 million people have watched the music video, which uses political satire to make fun of a certain posh neighborhood in Seoul, highlighting the economic inequalities found in the country. Here's a clip from the video. Although the song looks comical, and it is, K-pop or Korean pop is nothing to laugh at. The more than $4 billion industry's exports have been growing at an average annual rate of nearly 80% since 2007. Now, coupled with the success of Korean TV shows and films, this is all part of a wider cultural movement that's become known as the Korean Wave, or Hallyu. This, of course, hasn't gone unnoticed by the Korean government, who is now using the thriving industry as a tool of soft power to make its political mark in the international arena. Critics, however, are leery of an industry that projects perfection, undoubtedly influencing the Korean masses. Beneath the well-groomed and trained entertainers, is the industry a true reflection of South Korean society? Joining us via Skype from Seoul is Esther Oh, online news editor at CJ Entertainment and Management. That is the largest media conglomerate in South Korea. Also with us are Simon and Martina Stosky, the founders of the popular website Eat Your Kimchi. They're Canadian expats living in Bucheon, South Korea, who document the fun and quirky things that they like about the country, including K-pop. Welcome to the stream.
Thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So Simon and Martina, I want to start with you. Just between Friday and today, Gangnam Style has gotten another 20 million hits on YouTube. Is the attention that it's getting overblown?
I don't believe it's overblown in the least bit. I believe it deserves every single view that it's getting, perhaps even double the amount. It's a brilliant video. It's absolutely hilarious, and the song is exceptionally catchy. So I'm hoping to see it in the 200 million range soon.
And Martina, you agree, obviously?
Oh, absolutely. The thing is, a lot of K-pop lacks humor and irony, and so when this song first came out, we were just like, oh, finally a breath of fresh air. Even though Psy's been around for a while and he does a lot of funny stuff, we totally called this. When we reviewed his song, we said, this song can be viral, it's awesome. It's going to catch on for sure, so we're really happy.
And it certainly did. So, Seok, what does this song mean?
Well, I think that in his video, he actually takes on the neighborhood of Gangnam in a very clear and visual way. I think if you just look at the lyrics, it's not very clear what he's singing about. But when you look at all the visuals and the things that he's doing, from playing on or dancing on tennis courts to being in horse riding stables and yoga classes, all of these are activities that most Koreans can't participate in on a daily basis. And I feel like he's basically saying, look at I'm in the middle of all this bling, but it looks pretty hollow.
So Esther, why did this explode? Why did it go viral so quickly?
Well, I think, Korean pop music has been reduced to bubblegum pop. And, a lot of the K-pop artists are, teeny boppers and skinny jeans, but Psy, he's so different. He's not scared to just have fun, and he's a great producer, and I think that shows in the video.
Well, I'm going to switch over to our online community here for a second. I have a tweet from @Ladan502. No, it's like a parallel world with weird dances and hair. The alternate world experience is what I love about K-pop. I want to pose this to you. Do you think that that is what leads to the popularity of K-pop? Not so much that it's such an exaggerated world, but it's actually kind of an alternate universe.
I definitely think, I've looked at a lot of K-pop, and there is a lot of elements of the performers being like cyborgs and kind of living in the future. And most of the environments in K-pop videos are very abstracted. They're, kind of built environments with flashing lights and so on. So in a sense, it's exaggerated, but it's also not quite from what we're living in right now.
Simon and Martina, social satire is very, very common in the U.S. Why is it such a big deal to have social satire in a K-pop video?
Well, I think that a lot of things that people don't realize about K-pop is that it's not just like a music company. Like when we look at pop music like Justin Bieber or Backstreet Boys, New Kids on the Block, they just went into it for music. But in Korea, it's more than that. It's usually like an image. Even when they have Twitter, they're not really expressing like their true opinions like, oh, I'm having a terrible day. It's very controlled. So the image from dancing or from what they're wearing, everything about it is a certain message that's being passed down from someone. So when it comes to satire, irony, or something funny,
we never actually see that in K-pop.
So it's just shocking to see someone making a comment like that or jabbing fun at Korean society when normally they're very protected and they're saying something that's very delicate and simple, like love or loss in love or I'm having fun. But Gangnam style is like a totally different thing.
That's interesting that you said that. I want to go over to our online community here for a second, pick up on that theme. I have a tweet here from StyleShaker108 who says, I started to love K-pop because it was different from what I was used to. It had a different style from American music. I have a Facebook comment here as well from Ji-Hoo Park who says, U.S. is the most challenged market for South Korean pop musician Engage. PSY is not teenage targeted musician, so they are different from other popular K-pop bands. So I want to pose this question to you. Would you say that that's true? It's ironic that it's so difficult to break into the American market, but K-pop has managed to do so because of its unique style.
I definitely think that there is an element in which Korean Americans like myself and others who've looked at K-pop for a long time have kind of tried to keep K-pop and spread it in places where we live. But I do feel like I agree with the comment that Psy is actually kind of not at all with that formula. And I do feel like a lot of artists that I see that are trying to break into the American market are, kind of changing themselves for that market.
It kind of makes you wonder how Psy did it, because all of these K-pop artists have tried to penetrate the American market, and he's done it in such a huge way, and he's so the antithesis of what the typical K-pop star is.
He is, yes,
actually, that's something that we really were interested in talking about today, because we personally don't think that Psy is actually part of the Hallyu wave. Although he is popular amongst K-pop fans, Psy's breaking into the marketplace, we don't consider it breaking into it at all. We just think this song is so great. Humor is a universal language, and we think that this is actually outside the Hallyu wave, because what's inside the Hallyu wave is almost like an indie following. People who are interested in K-pop outside of Korea, it's kind of like an indie culture now. Like, in high school how people will listen to hip-hop or metal, there's also the K-pop crowd, and they don't intermingle with other crowds. And so when Psy actually became really big, a lot of the big K-pop fans were really upset because they didn't want K-pop being liked by other people who didn't understand K-pop. So it's really like an indie scene right now, and we don't consider Psy part of that like indie scene that everyone's interested in.
Esther, talk a little about the Korean government's influence in K-pop. There's a lot of talk today. We're getting a lot of tweets about this being a soft power tool for the Korean government. Is that something that you sense there?
Definitely. For the Korean government, K-pop provides sustainable income and capital, and the economic profit that it brings in for the country is tremendous. And the government is backing up, especially the Ministry of Culture and the KTO, Korea Tourism Organization. They're backing up popular K-pop stars, and a lot of them are becoming PR ambassadors in the face of Korea to bring in tourists from overseas. And right now, the latest trend is these tourism packages, and basically what they are, they're geared toward K-pop fans in China and Japan, and they come into Korea for a chance to see where their favorite K-pop star or K-drama was filmed, and that brings in a huge profit for the Korean government.
Seok-jung, talk a little bit more about that. The economics here are really quite huge.
Yes, they are. I think it is incredible that South Korea, I really think of it as a post-colonial country that's technically still at war. And when it comes to cultural identity and its global identity, it's an incredibly important asset to a country like South Korea. And I believe that Korea's own government agency that's tasked with looking at K-pop has found that for every $100 in K-pop exports, there's actually a return or an increase of $400 in IT sales, especially things like mobile phones. And a lot of the biggest beneficiaries of the K-pop wave are in fact companies like Samsung and Hyundai and LG.
I want to go over to our online community here for a second, which totally is echoing what you just said. I have a tweet here from Kimchi Lily who says, I think K-pop should have more exposure. More culture is shown to a world that does not even know South Korea exists. I also have another tweet here from Mus Jamsha. She says, K-pop is actually a good way to learn about Korean culture and get to learn the language easily. So it goes with what you were saying about it being really a kind of ambassadorship for South Korea.
Right. I mean, I'm sometimes troubled by that image, because I do feel like people rarely see the kind of darker underbelly of all this rapid development of Gangnam being, this incredibly wealthy enclave within the country. And what people are essentially seeing over and over again is Gangnam. When you see these incredibly well decked out and stylish K-pop stars, they reflect, almost none of the actual South Korean population and how they live. And when they are ambassadors for brands like Samsung, most people don't know that I believe about 56 workers at Samsung have actually died from contracting diseases at their semiconductor factories. So, to me, there's definitely this kind of an entire society living and working in very long hours and trying to make it in this country. And in fact, I also found out that about 70% of Korea's 20 to 30-year-olds believe that without access to economic privilege, without access to wealth, you actually can't go to an elite school or succeed in Korea. So that idea that anyone can make it is not really part of South Korean culture.
In the South Korean society that we're talking about, the day-to-day reality is unemployed youth and a lot of people really struggling with privately owned businesses?
I definitely think that, for example, South Korea's economy currently, 10 top corporations actually make up 80% of the country's GDP. And so what that has meant is an increasing number of small businesses and people that do things like run bakeries or run small academies are actually all being subsumed under this very strong corporate culture that's very top down.
Martina and Simon, I see you wanting to get in here.
Well, I guess the thing that I'm thinking about is when you're talking about as K-pop as an image for people to look at Korea, I think that there's a difference between people who don't understand or know anything about Korean culture and they're looking at something like Gangnam and they're just looking from the outside like, wow, Korea's really rich. And people who are actually interested in K-pop because they get to know their K-pop idols like they really get to know everything about them and they know how hard these people work. So there might be the facade of perfectness or plastic surgery, but the real K-pop fans will know that a lot of the rookie groups live in a single apartment. 8 people will share a room. They eat ramen noodles. Like, it's not very glamorous, actually. It might be glamorous much later on when they work hard, but at the beginning, it's not at all glamorous.
Like what you were talking about before about like the image of South Korean people working exceptionally hard. It's no different for K-pop idols themselves.
Incredible hours.
They are working nonstop. They have no breaks. A lot of the K-pop idols that we've spoken with personally, when we ask them, what days do they have off, they barely even have national holidays off.
Right.
So it's exceptionally hardworking people here.
Yeah. So I think there is a split between people who look at Korea and don't know much about it, and people who are personally interested in Korean culture, K-pop, and K-dramas, and see beneath that layer.
I think one of the images that K-pop is promoting that's like relevant to Korea is this image of hardworking, that nobody has like this glamorous lifestyle. Everybody's working exceptionally hard in order to achieve anything.
I don't know. I would disagree with the image. I mean, South Korea does promote itself as a very hardworking country, but I do feel like the image promoted by K-pop is of glamour and usually of kind of unmediated and very it's an extreme amount of bling that's mostly being shown in the K-pop videos. So I don't think that it's really showcasing hard work so much as look how far we've come. You know, Korea is extremely modern. Look at our technology. Look at our incredible, you know, audio visuals and so on.
It also brings up the issue of societal pressures within South Korea and this idea of whether it's working hard and working more work hours than any other country in the world, or whether it's this constant desire for perfection. I mean, it's sending a very clear message, and I think some would argue that that may not be the best message to be sending.
Yeah, I know. I do agree that, you know, I think that K-pop fans in Korea do understand that these artists are working very hard. But in fact, I think most of the world, and since I live in the US, I know that most people see Korea as a very simple success story for capitalism and so on. And I do feel like what people have to understand is that people are working very hard and very long, but often are not getting any slice of that pie. They're getting a smaller and smaller portion of that income.
That's very, very true. Very true.
I think our online community is also agreeing with you. I have a tweet here from @LiveJ. Gloomy future for South Korean young generation, even other countries. Popular culture is consolation and entertainment for them. So it's almost like you would say a form of escapism.
Yeah, I do feel like, you know, pop music in Korea is a great distraction. You know, for especially the teenagers and the students, and all my cousins live in Korea, they all studied until midnight, 3 a.m. And for them, K-pop is a very quick, kind of an easy escape from the reality of studying and working 12, 14 hours a day.
Esther, kind of back to Gangnam specifically, it really highlights the economic inequalities between the haves and the have-nots, and this economic inequality there, yes?
Oh, definitely. You know, Psy in the music video, it's interesting because the background is, it's like a very ritzy, flashy neighborhood. And the thing that's interesting with Gangnam is the people, because they're known to have a very flashy and glamorous lifestyle. And I think the Gangnam style represents a culture that, you know, aspires to not only get wealthy, but, you know, to flaunt the wealth. And, you know, even if you aren't rich, to pretend that you're rich and to continually flaunt what you have or what you don't have.
And how does that affect the values and the aspirations of young Koreans?
Well, I mean, I think it causes young Koreans, especially, you know, I've been living here for 2 years now, and I'm starting to feel that pressure to look and to act a certain way. And, you know, I think K-pop groups it's the same way for them. You know, they're manufactured to fit a certain mold. And I think it's very unnatural because, you know, agencies have such a strong control over these kids. And I think it's the same way with young teenagers because, you know, they look at these idols and they want to be them and they want to look a certain way. And, you know, before when Korean schools did surveys, a lot of the kids wanted to be doctors or lawyers, but now it's changed. And most of these kids want to be celebrities. And, you know, being an idol star now is something that kids look forward to, and they respect that.
I want to go to our online.
Jump in for a minute?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Sorry, just something you said really struck a chord with me. It's interesting you're saying that they're going from lawyers and doctors to K-pop idols because, as we talked before about hardworking, I think that they also see the idea of being a K-pop idol as an escape from that daily work grind. Because, as you know, that people that live in Korea, they work insane hours. They work past the normal 9 to 5. They work until midnight. Even outside of high school, we're talking about actual people at businesses, and they barely see their families. And so I think the idea of being a K-pop idol is also that glamorous escape from that daily grind, to be popular, to get to travel around and meet these people, but it's still a very difficult lifestyle. So I think that it's kind of like an escapist route from the normal route that you could take as a Korean person.
I also want to add that I think, you know, it's very telling that actually Gangnam has about 61% of Seoul's lawyers and I believe more than 50% of Seoul's doctors. So I think in terms of aspiring to be one of the professional class, it's seen as incredibly, the barriers have gotten higher and higher because of the educational inequality and how it's really concentrated in Gangnam.
I want to go to our online community here for a second, totally picking up on the theme of inequality that we're talking about. I have a tweet here from Dat Guy Cromer. I wonder at times how often burnout and nervous breakdowns come into play with K-pop artists. Very often, I'd wager. I also have another tweet here from Usnano who says, what's good about K-pop idols is the relation they have with their fans. They are not stars but idols who work hard too. So it seems almost that they are relatable because they're going through the same things, but at the same time they're also held up at an iconic level.
Yeah, I definitely think K-pop idols are they try to be approachable, and they are also very clear about projecting an identity for each of them. So if they're in a large group, there's the jock, and there's the nerd, and there's the, the player, and so on. And I do feel like they do work hard at connecting with their fans. This is undoubtedly true. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I'm really interested in when it comes to the marketing of K-pop idols, I find the way that K-pop idols are described by fans, it's a little bit disturbing to me. It's really in terms of religious terms. Like, these are K-pop idols. They're described as gods and goddesses and kings and queens, and a lot of people look up to these idols and they shake and they quiver, and that element of K-pop idols trying to relate to fans, it's difficult sometimes for fans to understand, because it's like, oh my god, this is my hero, this is my god speaking to me. So I find it very interesting.
Excuse me, Sukjong, back to this idea of societal pressures and this culture of perfection. Sorry. A lot of people have positioned South Korea, including Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, as this model nation. But when you look at the day-to-day lives of South Koreans, is it really a model nation?
Exactly. I think that it's very important that, Obama has praised South Korea's education system, and Hillary Clinton has called it a, kind of a model democracy. But I think in reality, I know that, the media industry has been incredibly censored, and increasingly it has actually gotten the index of partially free by Freedom House because of all the censorship there. And I do think that in terms of the inequality in Gangnam, the fact that 3% of a nation makes up 41% of Korea's Harvard, it's just an incredible level of inequality that you can't just look at the overall numbers. You can't just say Korea's GDP or its high school and college graduation rates are so impressive. You really have to look deep down, and I feel like there is an increasing sense of people not being able to make it just because they work hard.
And I want to back up to something you said, because I don't want people to miss it. It really underscores the power of Gangnam economically. It's as if one town had 41% of its students going to Harvard?
No, Harvard's incoming class is 41% from Gangnam.
So it's even bigger than what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's. I mean, basically, everyone wants to move into Gangnam, even if you don't have the money. People are trying to move there as parents just so they could try to give their child a step up into, a level of success. I mean, going to Seoul National University in Korea is basically, kind of an easier path to step up into a world of, better opportunities.
I want to go to our online community here for a second. I have a video question I want us to all take a listen to.
Hi, my name is Crystal Anderson, and I'm a professor at Elon University in North Carolina. My question is, what role does the actual cultural production, the music, the videos, as well as the audiences, the international audiences, play in soft power? Governments have control how they get disseminated, but they really don't have control over the meaning that people attach to them.
Good question.
Yeah, so this is really interesting because it kind of makes us shift gears a little bit, but it brings up the issue of the government, the role of the government, and the use of K-pop as propaganda. So what would you have to say?
I definitely think, from the presidency of Kim Young-sam, who realized that movies like Jurassic Park were bringing America a lot of export dollars, he saw that culture was an incredibly important avenue for promoting Korea's identity and economy. And so it's been a very deliberate policy since the mid-90s to invest in culture and cultural exports. And so I feel like, in terms of this industry, it is very hard to talk about an independent cultural product from Korea if you look at things like Korean pop and so on.
Martina, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I just think that, K-pop was around before the government realized that they could make money off of it. So I don't want people to think that, suddenly the government was like, let's create K-pop, because it's been around since the 80s, right? But one thing I want to say is no matter how much the Korean government pushes K-pop or K-drama or Hallyu, it has to come organically, because you cannot take, let's say, 9 members of a K-pop band, put it on the main radio station in the States and say, well, because it's here, people will love it.
All right, on that note, I'm going to pause everyone and say thanks to all of our guests for joining us. But do stay with us. Nobody go away. Post-show is next at stream.aljazeera.com. And tomorrow, we're going to be talking about assisted suicide and whether it is a human right. We'll examine the ethical and legal perspectives of euthanasia tomorrow on AJ Stream. Until then, we'll see you online. Welcome back to the Streams Post show. We're still discussing the viral music video Gangnam Style and the K-pop phenomenon, and want to get to some members of our community. I think we've got a few more video questions stacked up, don't we?
We do. Just 1 second. Let's take a look at this as I pull it up.
Audience here who have interest in K-pop, and I think it's become so popular because of how it's packaged, how it's delivered to us. It's a very potent form of pop music, which takes us kind of back to kind of the 80s and 90s, where we had all these girl groups and all these boy groups. And I think K-pop delivers the ultimate form of entertainment, which audiences can appreciate and find fascinating and ultimately escape into.
So Martina, I want to pose that question to you. Would you agree, is K-pop a potent version of South Korean culture?
I don't think it really represents South Korean culture. I think it's pop music, and people forget that. It's K-pop. So it's just like mainstream pop music in North America, but pop in Korea. But one thing that it does do for the North American audience is it gives them an output from something they're sick of. So our experience with K-pop fans is that they're kind of sick and tired of North American pop music. They're tired of the overt sexiness, they're tired of the swearing, the cussing, and they're really interested in K-pop because it's different, but it's still pop music, so it's not so difficult to get into.
What's really interesting about it is that K-pop doesn't have its own distinct sound or distinct genre. It borrows from just about every single genre and it repackages it as its own sound. So you can say afterwards that K-pop kind of sounds like this North American song or that North American song. So it gives you something similar and yet something different at the same time.
Esther, is there something distinctively Korean, though, about K-pop?
I don't see K-pop or the Korean wave as an exclusive phenomenon or culture, but I think it's rather a small part of globalization and popular culture as a whole. K-pop, yes, it is influenced by American and British music, but I also think that, like Simon and Martina were saying, it's managed to create something of its own. But for me, I think the Korean wave, that term itself, carries a lot of negative connotations. Some people just see it as a short-sighted fad. And, so I think it's, first of all, you have to deconstruct and analyze, what is exactly so Korean about this Hallyu wave. And if you look at how the Korean media is reporting on the Korean wave, it's really interesting because, for example, the Psy video, the Korean media has been reporting that people think of him overseas as a true Korean wave star and that he's a leader of the next Hallyu movement. But, when I looked at how he's been portrayed overseas, many of them simply introduce him as a viral sensation and a YouTube star, and a lot of people aren't even aware that he's Korean. So, I think the Korean media is overlooking or choosing not to cover how K-pop artists are being portrayed overseas, because K-pop gives Korea a sense of national pride, and that Korea has finally made it, and that the industry is influencing the rest of the world.
Seokjung, the influence of South Korean culture has actually been quite controversial in Japan. Why is that?
You mean in terms of how the Korean movies and so on have become popular?
That's been received.
I mean, I do think that, Korea and Japan have very, very tenuous relations over time because of the history of colonialism. And I feel like at first, actually, the Korean government banned imports from Japan. And now it started releasing it in the 90s. And now there's a lot of, I think, cross-mixing and so on between Korean pop and Japanese pop. And I think when Korean pop has become very popular in Japan, it has in a way shifted a lot of at least for the younger generation, their image of South Korea. They actually prefer K-pop over J-pop sometimes, and they want to go to South Korea just to
So that
look at
soft
the
power is
sites.
working.
I do think so, yeah.
But it's interesting, actually, the J-pop and K-pop, because I think it's actually a one-way street, because J-pop isn't really popular in Korea. It's popular in Japan, but K-pop is popular in Japan.
Yeah.
And we've noticed that there's actually a split between J-pop and K-pop image-wise. So J-pop will have people who are slightly more natural-looking in the sense that they might have crooked teeth, or they may look more like innocent and young, while Korea has a very much perfected the image of being perfect through either plastic surgery or just choosing people who are very good looking. And when it comes from Japanese culture, some people prefer J-pop because they want that natural look. They want to be able to relate to the person.
Very authentic.
And it's even in the contract sometimes that they're not allowed to fix their teeth. Like, they have to keep that naturalness. While K-pop is looked at like we said before, almost idol-like. Like, wow, these girls are so gorgeous, or wow, and they can look up to them.
It's shocking to see like an image like that.
So it's kind of a different way that it's being conceived in Japan and how it's being looked at.
Well, didn't it actually backlash on the K-pop artist Rain? He said he wasn't going to get eyelid surgery.
Well, he's never had eyelid surgery.
Yeah, no, like he says he won't, but that's unusual for a K-pop artist not to agree to some form of self-enhancement, right?
I would disagree with that. Like, I think it's a little unfair because a lot of people will keep saying that, you know, oh, all K-pop celebrities had plastic surgery. Well, there are different labels that will represent different groups in Korea, and some labels are known to have more people with plastic surgery than others, and other labels will use it as actually like a tool, and they'll say, no one in our group will ever get plastic surgery. So it's almost like there's a headbutting.
It's part of the appeal sometimes.
So not everyone has double eyelid surgery, and people will be proud of it. Like Guyan, one of our favorite Korean artists, like she has very much the Korean eye, and she absolutely refuses to have anything done. So not everyone.
Well, it's interesting. I have a graph here. And it shows South Korea. Look at my graph. I slaved over this graph. Look at that. South Korea leading the pack, followed by Greece, Italy, and then Brazil for the most plastic surgeries per population, per 1,000 population. This graph is from 2 years ago, but aside from K-pop, it seems to be a cultural phenomenon to be and look perfect.
I do think that. Sorry, if I could just start. I did read the statistic, like 1 in 4 Korean women will actually have some sort of, you know, surgical procedure done. And I do think that, you know, K-pop and Korean culture and so on, like the, you know, the movie stars and the celebrity culture, they don't really add pressure to that surgery industry. I do feel like people have been doing plastic surgery and are increasingly able to purchase it and buy it, and it's become almost the beauty norm, and I feel like that is influenced by ideas of what's beautiful in the West and so on.
Simon, we've got 30 seconds. You want to wrap this one up for us?
I feel like if you go to Gangnam, then you know you're there because you see nothing but advertisements for plastic surgery everywhere. It's quite disturbing. If you get off the subway, there's not an ad for anything but plastic surgery. So Gangnam style right there.
All right. Thanks to all of our guests for staying with us on the show. Our guests from Seoul, Korea. It's in the middle of the night for you, so thank you so much. And Suk-jung, thank you for being here, coming in from New York. We do want to take a moment, though, to get to Anushe, who's got some other leads for us that we're following.
The stream is back on the road in Charlotte, North Carolina for the Democratic National Convention. For protesters, the convention kicked off with the March on Wall Street South. Netizens used #mouse to live tweet the event, which had a heavy police presence. Anti-war group Code Pink posted this photo of a helicopter over the march, tweeting, "Extreme overkill regarding security here. We are peaceful protesters." Some reported that the police, taking a cue from the Occupy movement, broadcast their own footage. Democracy Now! Tweets police live streaming video of Mouse before DNC in Charlotte. The protest included local and national groups from Occupy and anti-war activists to undocumented immigrants. Stream producer Dan Ming was on the scene and tweeted, "Immigrants' rights groups shouting undocumented and unafraid here at Mouse." Take a look. 1 second, I'm going to pull it up right now. Here we go. Education, no deportation! The Undocubus is a group of undocumented immigrants riding through the U.S. South to raise awareness of their situation on the way to the convention. At Wall Street South, the official account for the march tweeted, "Undocubus is here to tell DNC 2012 that undocumented people have had enough of discrimination, exploitation, and racism in U.S. policy." We'll look at the Undocubus in more detail on Thursday as we continue our coverage of the convention. Let us know what you think of the DNC using #AJStream. Lisa?
All right. And on tomorrow's show, we're going to talk about assisted suicide. Is it an expression of human freedom and the right of choice? We examine the ethical and the legal perspectives on euthanasia. So tweet us your thoughts, send us some video comments, and until then, we'll see you online.